Hello and welcome to my write-up of Silent Monitor from TryHackMe. So this lab first involves finding a login page and abusing an SQL injection to login as administrator, then finding an RCE in the host uptime field, and then viewing an important configuration file to find credentials for an SSH login, then downloading and cracking a KeyPass file. So first I'm going to run nmap. Just grab the command here. nmap-scv scripts and versions, fully verbose and highest thread count, so it'll go quick. I have already run this, and you can see here port 22 and 5050 are open, and this port is a Python web server workzug HTTP. And since I only had 2 ports open, I tried a full UDP port scan and a full TCP port scan, but nothing else of importance showed up. Next, I checked out the web server. So you can see here it's a network operation center portal, so you can see the network segments available, the uptime, open alerts, monitor hosts, etc. When reading through this, I found it said audit logging for the CorpNet internal network, so I tried to guess a domain name such as corpnet.local or corpnet.com, so I could try and find a web domain or a web host that is different, so I could potentially find more information. This page is pretty static, you can't really do much. In that case, I decided to fuzz directories. Here I used GoBuster. And after a short while it will come back saying it has found the internal directory, and you can see here it has came back with finding internal. So let's see what's at that directory. You can see here this is just a login page. What originally threw me off is that it looks quite polished. It looks something like a WordPress login or something like an official application, and when I see official applications I tend not to try like cross-site scripting or SQL injection because I automatically assume it's quite protected, because they are somewhat trivial to stop. But in this case, this seems to be a custom written application by the box creator, and we can use a successful SQL injection bypass to log in as an administrative user. So let's just try a simple and admin or 1 equals 1, and I'll explain what this is doing. So the SQL injection command that I assume is most likely to be used is something like this. So we're trying to select all from users where username equals the username we supply and password equals the password we supply. However, we're allowed to essentially inject SQL queries so that it is taken into account of the query and is not sanitized. And essentially what we are doing is entering the name admin. So select all from users where username equals admin, and then we are going or 1 equals 1, meaning that select all from username where select all from users where username equals admin or true. So if a user admin doesn't exist, this query will work. So what this is essentially doing is we're selecting all from users where the username equals admin or the username is true. So it's checking to see whether the username equals admin. If that doesn't exist, it'll check the query or true, which will always return true. So this command here, this admin or 1 equals 1, will always return true whether admin exists or it doesn't. And then we will specify a semicolon and some dashes. This effectively comments out the rest of the SQL query, which checks for the password, meaning we don't have to supply a valid password, we only have to supply a valid username or bypass that username with or 1 equals 1. And this will be successful. And this is quite a static site as well. Can't really do much apart from sign out. I also fuzz for directories, nothing really interesting. You got some audit logs here, etc. Since this was a Python application, and it seemed to be it seemed to be taking into account our login names, I thought we may be able to do some sort of SSTI attack, because we're able to directly render like user input. You can see here these are queries that a user may have inputted. And since we have control over this, we may be able to inject a Python SSTI payload, but I was not actually able to conduct that action. But what you can see here is the host health. It allows us to essentially check the uptime of a host. Let's just try the local host user, the local host IP, and you can see here it's just using a ping command. It seems to be blocking. It seems to have a certain blacklist, not a whitelist, meaning that any kind of escape sequence character like a semicolon or backticks, backticks will result in invalid hostname or IP address, as well as something like this. This all is not allowed. However, I assume it's using a blacklist, not a whitelist, so it doesn't cover all ends of potential escape sequences. So what we can do is use the new line character to essentially escape this ping command and run a new command, and I'll do that not through burp, but just through the console, the network debugger. Just run this with the network debugger, and here, and edit and resend, and here we will do the escape sequence. We'll do the HTML equivalent of a new line. I assume this has not been accounted for in the blacklist, so therefore we can use this ID and just make that a bit bigger. You can see here, we're just changing the post request to include a %0a, which is the new line in HTML URL encoding, and then the command ID. And we will view the response here. And you can see here we get the response. I also tried this with URL encoding like semicolons and backticks, and it still didn't work. So it means it's then decoding the URL encoding for checks. It's not a client-side check. So I therefore assume it's a blacklist. We will try and list the current files in our directory. And we can see here we have the database file, the app.py file, the templates file, and secret.config. This sounds pretty nice to me. Cat secret.config. And we can see here we get some configuration information, including a backup agent password. You can see sysadmin with the password secure backup access. I immediately tried to log in via SSH, so let's do that. SSH admin at what's the IP? 49.190.127. And you can see here we have access, and the user txt file is here with permissions on that, and yep, we can read and write it. And we see the backups folder here. That looks pretty interesting. And in here we can see an infrastructure key pass file. Let's check out this readme file first. Infrastructure credentials are stored and placed here by the backup agent. Treat all files as confidential. Infrastructure key pass file. So when I was doing this, it seems to like kind of hint at maybe a cron job running here, maybe a vulnerable cron job, root cron job, etc. But before I explored that, I wanted to try and crack the keypass file. And we can do that by just starting up a Python web server on the sysadmin user here in the try hack me machine and just downloading it to our machine. And we will have it here, infrastructure keypass database file, pass to John. We'll just try and get the hash of the password here with keypass to John. However, the file version 40,000 is not supported. This just means our keypass to John installation is not updated to account for the newer keypass encryption algorithm. So I had to install a newer version of keypass to John, or the newest version of John. So we'll just do it here, here. And this is just the GitHub clone of the newest John version that I compiled, and we've got the hash here, and let's keep it in the hash.keypass database file. I've already got it saved here from when I first attempted this lab, and now let's crack it. We're just supplying the hash file to the newest John installation because, yet again, any older John versions won't recognize this hash and can't crack it. I've already cracked it, so let's try and show. And you can see here infrastructure and Spring. The password is Spring, which is fairly weak or very weak. And we'll just try and open it. And you can see here we have what seems to be a root user password. We'll just copy this. If I can copy. Seems to be lagging. Here we are. Copy password. Let's see what this password is. Secure pass on keypass. And since we have access to the SSH, we'll just use su root and try and see if we can log on. Authentication failure. And that doesn't make much sense. Maybe it's not in our clipboard anymore. Clipboard will be cleared in 12 seconds. It says here clipboard will be cleared in 12 seconds, so it's only stored on the clipboard for a limited amount of time, which is pretty neat. And you can see here what's the root password, and you can just view the root flag, and you can see here we have the root user, and we can view the root flag. So this was a pretty easy machine. I don't necessarily agree with the medium. I'd say this is probably in the easy category, but I think it's pretty nice. It allows you to get familiar with maybe exploiting web applications, but the path is pretty straightforward. There's no real like guessing work or other avenues to explore. It's kind of straightforward, which is good for beginners. But overall, I like this machine. Thank you guys for watching, and see ya.